Hello there, guys. How are you? Today, you are going to see a video analysis about The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. My classmates and I are going to explain the elements of fiction in this short story. Alright, if you read the Telltale Heart story, you may know that this short story is full of mystery, and the when and where of the story might be a little confusing. When we talk about the series of events or actions that occur in a story, we refer to this as the plot, that is, the sequence in which incidents in a narrative are organized. For instance, we know that the beginning of the story, that is, the introduction or exposition, set us in the present, but we don't actually know where the present is occurring at the moment. See here. True. Nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am. But why will you say that I'm mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken! And observe how healthy, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. On the other hand, the main series of events occur in the past. The telling of the past actions starts us, but you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night about midnight I turned the latch of his door and opened it, oh, so gently, and then, when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in the dark lantern, all closed, closed, that no light shone out, and then I thrust in my head. So the whole story is told by the main character, and this makes him the narrator. Furthermore, the conflict in fiction is a position of character, and we can see that between the main character and the old man, where the hate lights onto the old man's eye. Read here. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. He had the eye of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. Lastly, the exciting force in this story happens between man versus man and how these events will lead to. Now, before I continue with an extensive look at the plot, I'd like to mention the setting. This is the place, time, and reason why the events occur. The main story develops inside a bedroom, where the main character describes his actions, which end up in the killing of the old man. The place is described as
His room was as black as pitch with the thick darkness, for the shutters were close fastened through fear of robbers.
the extreme darkness might function as an indicator for the future bad things that will happen and to show us the wicked actions of the characters. The extreme darkness might function as an indicator for the future bad things that will happen and to show us the wicked actions of the character. Moreover, the period is not clarified in this story, but the use of a lantern and shutters in the house may lead us to the time where the events occur, which might be between the 1500 and the 1600. In addition, the line of events are developed through the time span of a week. See here. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. Furthermore, we can detect some effects, such as the darkness of the atmosphere, as I mentioned before. On the other hand, we don't know what motivated the character to commit the murder. He explains he just got the idea of doing it. He says, "It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night." Okay, now going back to the plot, we can detect divisions in it. The story, as I mentioned before, begins in the present, with the main character telling us, or someone, how all started.
It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object there was none. Passion there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. He had the eye of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. And so by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eye forever.
After this, the character tells us how the weeks develop until the climax, specifically the death of the old man. And this I did for 7 long nights, every night just at midnight. But I found the eye always closed, and so it was impossible to do the work, for it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning, when the day broke, I went boldly into the chamber, and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone, and inquiring how he has passed the night. So you see he would have been a very profound old man, indeed, to suspect that every night just at 12 I looked in upon him while he slept. We then encounter ourselves with the first inciting moment, in which we believe the climax of the story will occur, but it doesn't. Had my head in, and was about to open the lantern, when my thumb slipped upon the thin fastening. The old man sprang in bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle, and in the meantime I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in the bed listening, just as I have done, night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the wall. The climax comes with the eighth night, where the main event occurs, the murder of the old man. It's the highest point in the story, and when all the preparations the main character did comes to its finish point.
The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder. I say louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous. So I am. And now, at the dead hour of the night, amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. Yet, for some minutes longer, I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder, louder. I opened the lantern and leapt into the room. He shrieked once only. In an instant I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. I then smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. But for many minutes the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead.
After the climax, all that it happens leads to the resolution of the story. This is called denouement. When I had made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart, for what had I now to fear? There entered 3 men, who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. Now we have come to the conclusion of the story. After everything the main character has done, he has a breakdown and confesses what he has done to the police officer. But we don't know what happens next. Will he go to jail? Is he in court telling what he did? Therefore, this story has an open ending that leaves the readers to ponder or imagine what happened to this character.
Hi, my name is Andrea Avalos and I'm going to talk about some elements. Flashback. We can say that this story is told through a flashback. The main character is reliving in the present what he has done in the past, telling the whole story to someone, as we can see in this example.
How then am I mad? Hearken and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story.
The foreshadowing happens when the characters tell us why the idea of murder first came to him, as we see here.
I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. He had the eye of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. And so by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eye forever.
We can say that this is a crime story, in addition to being a gothic and a horror novel. Here, the character commits an assassination to which, at the end of the story, revolves around it. The character confesses his crime. Moreover, we can add that the world in which the story is told is realistic, since it reproduces the world to which we are familiar with. Mental issues and crimes are common in our world, and what is described here are similar to what we live or hear on the news on a daily life. This story falls into a horror gothic literature, since the plot is driven around horror and death. Furthermore, the emphasis on how the character describes his own emotion along with the story and his actions is what makes this novel gothic.
Hello everyone, I'm Nadia Sanchez and I'm going to talk about the next few topics. Okay, so let's start with the theme of the story, which is described as the central or dominating idea of the literary work. Here we can tell that anger and insanity prevails among the story. The main character is driven by the hate he feels towards the old man's vulture eye. But also he tries to reconcile the idea that he's not mentally ill, that he's okay and healthy, and that his action does not follow a madman's personality. Let's continue now with the point of view. The story is told through the eyes of the narrator, which at the same time is the main character. We can only read his side of the story, what he saw, did, and heard. Moreover, the narrator imagines what other people might think or say about him. In this way, the line between the truth and lies is blurred. Now, which type of narrator do we have in the story? In this case, Shakespeare uses the first-person narrator, as you can see in this example. It is also a subjective narration because the narrator seems unreliable. He tries to get readers to share his side or to assume values or views not usually presumed by the reader itself, as you can see in this other example. So, what can we say about reliable? In this case, the narrator is not reliable because even though he tries to tell us what happened, he also wants to convince us that he isn't crazy, as you can see in this example. Now, what can we say about the mood of the story? We can say that the mood revolves around the feeling of darkness and madness. For the first one, the story develops around the darkness of the bedroom and at night. Even the end of the story occurs at the morning when it is still dark, as you can see in this fragment. For the second one, the narrator, which is the main character as we mentioned before, he says from the beginning of the story that he's not a madman. as if he's trying to change someone's mind, as you can see in this other fragment.
I had been, and am, but why will you say that I am mad? The disease has sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in heaven and earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story.
As regards the moral of the story, we can say that the author probably tried to show us that if you're doing something for your own good, just to make you feel better, sometimes it may not come out as you planned it, especially if it's something selfish, like getting rid of someone because there's something about that person that annoys you so much. And that is the way the main character felt as regards the old man's eye, which is why he killed the poor man, as you can see in this fragment. Moreover, the main character thought that he would be able to live with what he had done, but he committed crimes, so that soon breaks and he started feeling guilty, and his mind played tricks on him, and at last he confessed what he had done, as you can see in this other fragment.
Almighty God! No! No, they heard! They suspected! They knew! They were making a mockery of my horror! This I thought, and this I think. But anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt I must scream or die. And now, again. Hark! Louder! 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 Louder!
Hello, I'm Florencia Sanchez and I'm going to talk about the characteristic of the main and secondary characters. The main character is a round character which is inconsistent and unpredictable. It's hard to summarize and understand, and displays internal conflicts found in real people, as we can see in this example. Now, the secondary characters. We know about them through what the main characters say about their actions and thoughts, an indirect characterization. The old man is a flat character, embodies one or two qualities, is not psychologically complex and thus accessible to the reader, can be stock or stereotype, as we can see in the following example. The police officers are flat characters too, as we can see in this example. The main character is a static character. Don't change as a result of what happened. The reader's knowledge about him does not grow. All this character does throughout the story is to think a plan to murder. The character confesses the crime because he could not bear the situation, not because he regrets his actions, as we can see in this example. The old man and the police officers are also static characters. We only learn about them by the narrator's comments about their actions and feelings. There is no development on their actions nor the story about them, as we can see in the following example. The way characters are introduced. Main characters. The story is told by him, and so he starts by talking about himself, about how he feels at the moment of telling the story, like in this example. Secondary characters. The main character introduced the old man by letting us know how he feels about him, like in this example. He also introduced the three police officers by letting us know there was someone knocking the door, and then he said that they introduced themselves once they were inside, like in this example. The way characters speak. Main character. He's the one who speaks the most, since he's the one telling the story. Secondary characters. The old man barely has a few lines. At least that's all we know from the main character's perspective. As for the three police officers, we do know they speak, since they have introduced themselves when they arrived, but there is no specific line they say. The way characters think. The main character thinks of himself as a clever man, wise, intelligent, and skillful enough to proceed into his actions. We don't actually know what nor how the secondary characters think, since it's the main character who tells the story, and what we are told is what he thinks the rest think. Character's appearance. We only know about the secondary character's appearance. They are described in a short way. The old man asks. He had the eye of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it. And the police officers ask. There enter three men who introduce themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. In this way, we are only told what the narrator wants us to know to get on his side.
Hi there, I'm Noelia and I'm going to talk about character's company. As regards the main character, we can imagine that he lives with the old man. Besides that, we don't have much information that could add data about their relation or other things. As regards character's actions, the main character was trying to make himself look good and sane while telling the story of how and why he committed the murder. As regards the secondary character, the old man, he knew there was something wrong when he heard the noise. So from that moment on, he stood awake and sitting in the bed. He even felt scared and could not sleep anymore. Furthermore, he was trying to calm himself. Irony. Gap between words and truth. Verbal irony. Here we can see that the narrator explains there was actually no reason to kill the old man, that he hasn't done anything to the main character, and this might actually be true. But at the same time, we can tell the irony in it, since the narrator knows there's something wrong with himself, but doesn't want to accept it. Gap between words and meaning. Verbal irony. In this case, the narrator is saying that something exterior is causing him to confess his crime, but we don't actually know if that's the case. Maybe something inside him is making him feel guilty, or maybe he realized that what he did is absolutely wrong. Perhaps we will never know the true meaning of his thoughts. Overall, we can tell the narrator is not mentally healthy. Insanity is the theme of this story, and the sound in his mind could be caused by something the character is deleting out of the story. Gap between intention and outcome. Dramatic irony. In this case, we can see the narrator trying to let us know that he's not crazy, but we can tell that won't be true. The intention to change our mind about him will lead to the outcome of us realizing the narrator misinterprets the reality he's living in. Schizophrenia is a mental illness that can describe this character's actions, and as we can see, he can't accept he needs to be treated and tries to justify his actions but fails to finish victorious. Gap between intention and outcome. Dramatic irony. In this case, we can see the narrator trying to let us know that he's not crazy, but we can tell that won't be true. The intention to change our mind about him will lead to the outcome of us realizing the narrator misinterprets the reality he's living in. Gap between appearance and reality. Situational irony. The narrator is confusing appearance with reality. The irony here reveals that there's something wrong with the narrator's mind, and what he sees and tells is not what is really happening, and it exposes a further health issue with the character. Style and tone. Diction. The narrator uses a formal choice of words. We can see this happening because of how the character is trying to sound intelligent and wise. Imagery. The narrator uses a lot of imagery in his words, often to represent visual imagery like the darkness of the situation and places. Syntax. The narrator uses full grammatical sentences to tell the story. This is a way to show his healthy mind and to prove himself to the people or person he is telling the story to. In consequence, there are not ungrammatical agreements of words. Tone. The tone of the story suggests nervousness, insanity, and guilt.
Since the narrator is also the main character, he expresses what he felt through the story. Structure. The narrator uses a variety of sentence structures. We can see that sometimes he uses simple sentences to show determination in his speech. But he also uses complex sentences to expand the idea he's trying to convey.